Is God done with Israel yet? Well, I don't think so, but there is some debate on that. We'll talk about that. Stay tuned.
Holy Spirit, come and refresh me. Holy Spirit, come.
Welcome to Through the Bible in 5 Minutes, and I'm your host, Brad Keeney. And today we're going to discuss the situations happening. It's episode 23. We're in Revelation chapter 7, verses 5 through 8, which God lists specific tribes of Israel and goes through and names these people and talks about this. Now, the opening thing I started with talks about whether the church has replaced Israel, or does God actually still care about Israel? I believe the church, in a way, God has turned his attention towards them, but has he actually replaced Israel? I don't think so. But some people don't feel that way, so I don't want to step on their toes. But some of the reasons why I believe that God has not replaced Israel with the church is, first of all, one of the miraculous things we've seen right now is in May of 1948, a language, a people, and a land was restored miraculously after 2,000 years basically being gone. And that was Israel. That's a miracle, and that was prophesied in the Bible between 3 and 5 times, depending on how you look at it. So I don't think he's done for that reason, because of the biblical prophecy fulfillment. But also, remember, in Daniel chapter 9, which we looked at again, and I'll remind you again that with this episode, all the episodes are tied together. We've been going line by line, chapter and verse, clear from Revelation 1:1. But in episode 23, where we're at now, it ties really tightly to episode 22 and 21. And in episode 21, for example, we looked at Romans chapter 11, verses 25 and around there, where it talks about how there's an age of the Gentiles that we're going through now, where God is working with the Gentiles and the non-Jewish people to get them saved. And then he's going to turn his attention back to Israel, and at that time all Israel will be saved. In episode 22, we looked at Daniel chapter 9. And we had to understand the 70th week of Daniel, which is the 70th week of the Jewish people when he turns his attention back to them, I also think. So there's 2 witnesses there, plus the prophetic witness. And I think our 4th witness we're going to see today as we look at him naming specific Jewish tribes and people and how he's dealing with them. So again, I respect you if you believe the other way, but I don't agree with that per se. But we can all agree to disagree. And remember, we've been looking at prophecies of Christ through this whole thing. And as we look at those prophecies of Christ, we have seen that one of the things that happens often is God says something and we think we know what it means, but then we don't. When we look at Jesus' first coming and how so many people were surprised at how it worked out. So we have to expect that with Jesus' second coming, there's going to be things we're going to be surprised about. But anyway, those things having been said, let's get to our study here. Revelation chapter 7, verses 5 through 8. But I'm going to start with Revelation chapter 7, verse 1 to get us in context. So looking at that now. Revelation 7:1. After these things I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, on the sea, or on any tree. Then I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels with whom it was granted to harm the earth and the sea, saying, Do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees till we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. And I heard the number of those who had been sealed were 144,000. Of all the tribes of the children of Israel were sealed. That's where we stopped last time. So to start today, verse 5. Of the tribe of Judah, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Reuben, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Gad, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Asher, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Naphtali, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Manasseh, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Simeon, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Levi, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Issachar, 12,000 were sealed. And in verse 8, of the tribe of Zebulun, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Joseph, 12,000 were sealed. And of the tribe of Benjamin, 12,000 were sealed. So there we see, he's very specific here in saying these are Jewish people of these tribes of Israel. Now, going back and looking at this, we need to understand from the book of Genesis that, remember, God is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That is one of the names he says he'll be referred to throughout history. And these are Jacob's sons. And Jacob got his name changed to Israel. And in Genesis chapter 29, verses 31 through Genesis 30, verse 22, remember, you can rewind this and get those references again if you need and look them up for yourself. I think everything I say you should look up for yourself, pray. And remember, it's not what I say, it's what the Holy Spirit and the Bible convinces you of. But anyway, in those areas, you'll see the 12 tribes of Israel talked about, with one exception, and that is Benjamin. And he's mentioned in Genesis chapter 35, verses 16 through 18. That's when Benjamin's mentioned. So there are 12 sons of Israel, but there's an interesting thing we need to talk about here, and that is how the 12 tribes of Israel aren't always listed the same way. And it's kind of a confusing deal, but at any rate, here we have an interesting thing I want to point out, and that is that Dan is missing, and Ephraim is missing. Now, there's an interesting thing I need to explain to you, though, how that fits in, and that is, in Genesis, those references I gave you, you'll see the exact 12 tribes of Israel. But what happened was Joseph, his son, was taken off to Egypt. And in Egypt, he had two sons called Ephraim and Manasseh that are not officially Jacob's or Israel's sons, but he adopts them later on in the book of Genesis. And when he adopts them, sometimes Joseph is mentioned as a son, and that's a proper son, or sometimes Ephraim and Manasseh are mentioned as sons, which he adopted them, but then Joseph couldn't be mentioned, but that still gives 13 people. So what happens is usually when those are mentioned, someone else is left off, and the most common thing I think we run into is Levi, when they're talking about land, is left off, because Levi doesn't actually have a land inheritance. Their inheritance falls within the 12 tribes of Israel. So sometimes, again, what will happen is Ephraim and Manasseh will be mentioned, Joseph won't be, but then Levi won't be because of land purposes. If they're listing land, that's one reason why the numbers would change. And there's other things. But Dan is a proper son. Now, an interesting thing, why might Dan not be mentioned? Well, Dan was known for idolatry. And if you look in Judges chapter around 17 through 19, it kind of lays out the groundwork there and talks about how they went up north and did what they weren't supposed to and they were into idolatry. And that story is told in there, but it goes all the way through. And Ephraim may not have been mentioned because of idolatry also. Oftentimes when God was upset with the northern kingdom of Israel, he'd call him Ephraim and say, Ephraim, Ephraim, why are you doing this? That's kind of my paraphrase. But at any rate, that's an interesting way of reasons of why Dan and Ephraim may not be mentioned. But again, remember, Ephraim is not a proper son, but Dan is. So there's some confusion here. I want to put that out for you to think about and pray about. If you have a study Bible, look up and see what your study Bible says about it. There's different reasons, but that's the one I find most convincing. But at any rate, it's not debatable that it's 12 tribes from Israel that he's talking about. That's not debatable. 144,000 Israelites. Now, some people will also talk about these as being 144,000 Billy Grahams, preaching to the people of Israel to get them saved. And I can see where they're coming at that from, but there's an interesting thing, and that is, it doesn't really say that. It could be that, but it doesn't actually say that. So keep that in mind as well. At any rate, I think that's probably enough for today. Although I want to throw a scripture and some references to Jesus' first coming in there, because we always try to look at prophecy again. So our prophecy reference today is going to be kind of quick, but we're going to look at how Jesus was a stumbling block to the Jews, which is interesting, kind of fits in with what we're looking at today, because the time of the Gentiles started because Jesus was rejected by the Jewish people, and still he's rejected to this day. 90% of Jewish people do not accept Jesus, or even more than that if you go to Israel. However, he's going to, like I said, turn his attention to them, as we saw in Revelation. We just read it. So, where that's prophesied at is Isaiah 8:14. And he will be a sanctuary. But for both houses of Israel, he'll be a stone that causes men to stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. And for the people of Jerusalem, he will be a trap and a snare. And if we're looking for fulfillment in this, we can look to Romans 9:31 through 33, for example, where it says Israel stumbled over the stumbling stone. As it is written, see, I lay a stone that causes men to stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. And one who trusts in him will never be put to shame. Then we have the 1 Peter reference there also. But I know we're running short on time, and it's really important. I try to keep these short, simple, painless, as we said, easy to digest, just to kind of get you going. And something else I want to mention if you watch to this point is, do like and subscribe, and also share these videos. We need to reach people for Jesus. And to be honest with you, the reason I'm doing this is because right now we live in a time when revelation's important, people are interested, and I'm trying to get them interested in the Bible and interested in Jesus and interested in a relationship with Him. So please help me in that. And we'll see you next time on Through the Bible in 5 Minutes. God bless.